Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to be going over the Grand Power Stribog SP45A3. So the Stribog SP45A3 is not new by any means. Plenty of videos out there going over it. I want to share some of my experiences with it, along with some of the upgrades that I have done in typical fashion of the way that I do videos. Do it in kind of different sections. First off, going over some of the basics of the gun, go over some of the shooting impressions, and then I'm going to go over some of the things that I see talked about a lot on the different forums and on the internet, and share some of my experiences with that. And then lastly, I'll go through some of the personal choices and upgrades that I've made for this gun. But before I go on any further, I would ask that if this content appeals to you, please hit the like, subscribe, and share this video as much as you possibly can. Definitely would appreciate it. It helps out with the algorithm. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So what is the Stribog SP45A3? It is, depending on how you ask, could be categorized as a PCC or an SMG. It is a 45 caliber gun. Typically comes in a pistol configuration. It does have an 8-inch barrel on it. Does have a roller delayed operating system on it. Roller delayed may be something that is associated with the MP5. Does use HK UMP 45 pattern magazines. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. It does have both a push button and a paddle mag release. It does have an AR-15 type bolt catch. More on that a little bit later. It does have a non-reciprocating charging handle. It is reversible. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, since this one is not the OEM. It does have an ambidextrous safety lever. It does also have a threaded barrel that typically comes with a thread protector. I'm going to go ahead and drop in a picture of what this looked like when I first got it in its factory configuration. This does have a monolithic upper that has pick rail that runs continuously across the top. It does also have pick rail sections that runs on the forward end of the handguard, and then does have 3 M-lock slots on the side. So like many different SMG slash PCs out there, the upper is the serialized number. The lower is just a module that contains the grip, the mag well, and the trigger housing. There are offerings out there from Lingle. We'll expand on that a little bit later into the video. There are iron sights that are built in, a little bit hard to see. They're pretty small. You might be able to see the front sight there. You won't be able to see the rear. It is just a little notch. It is exactly underneath my optic mount here. They are pretty microscopic, very low and obscure, but they do work. And as far as the rear end goes, they do come in different configurations. As you see right now, I do have a B&T stock with the HBI Industries folding adapter on here. But you can get these that have the Picatinny rear cap on here, which is what mine came with. You can get various different stock options out there that attach via Picatinny. You can also get this with the SP Tactical folding brace. Opted not to do that on this one. And then there might even be factory SBR options out there. I don't know 100% for sure on that one. And then for the fire control group, you can't really tell here, especially if you're used to looking at AR-15s, but it does use a AR-15 type fire control group. I mentioned you might not be able to tell, because typically with an AR, you would see a pin for the trigger, you would see a pin for the hammer. This does have a fire control group housing that goes inside the lower receiver. Right, so I want to take a minute to expand a little bit more onto the roller delayed system that the Stribog SP45A3 has. So I think the MP5 is probably the most widely known roller delayed system. Definitely known to be smoothing out recoil, leaps and bounds better than direct blowback in terms of both recoil impulse, felt recoil, running it suppressed, eliminating port pop, all that type of stuff. The Stribog does not have as quite as a complicated roller delayed system as the MP5. To kind of talk about that a little bit further, It does offer a single roller counterweight system, considered a little bit more modern, simpler design, but it does have a quicker recoil impulse, whereas the MP5 has a dual roller setup, and it provides a famously smooth and slower shuffle due to its more traditional mechanical locking. Typically results in MP5 often being considered softer and better suppressed, though the Stribog offers a simpler maintenance. Both are roller delayed, but the implementation and resulting feel are distinct. So, with the Stribog, as you can see right here, the roller is exactly right here. And as I sit there and work their charging handle, see if I can get this to focus, you can see the roller kind of come up as the action starts to work to the rear. So this is the counterweight that I mentioned before. This is the bolt. When you go to cycle the action, the recoil initially starts moving the counterweight, and you see that slight delay as it moves back and then pulls up and then cycles the action. Something else I want to mention here is you notice that the roller is hollow. Unlike something like the MP5 where you have solid rollers in there, and again, two of them, you just have a single roller here, which is hollow. So I have heard and read that there is offerings out there for people at least who have made machine solid rollers. Haven't seen them on the wide commercial market, but it is a little bit different. Don't have any other 45 ACP chambered subgun or PCC to compare it to. Different chamberings. I mean, I could shoot handguns side by side. The 45 definitely has more push and more shove to it, more felt recoil. So automatically you would think that a 45 SMG would have more recoil to it, and it does. But that being said, I can tell you that it is pretty smooth. So I do have my AKV that is chambered in 9mm. That is direct blowback, and the recoil is pretty freaking harsh. With the SP45, not so much. Barrel length's a little bit different. You know, this does have an 8-inch barrel, whereas my AKV has a 10-inch, 10.2, I think, barrel. Don't really think that's going to make much difference in felt recoil, but I'll say that I do feel that the SP45 with the roller delayed system that it has, even though it's simpler than the MP5, it definitely makes a difference if you were going to be shooting it compared to a direct blowback 45 SMG. Okay, so before we move on, I just want to show that the gun is definitely clear. I am going to be showing a couple different types of magazines here. One of them being the OEM 20 rounders that come with the gun. You get 3 of them. Mag is empty, along with the Global Ordnance 25 rounders, along with the HK UMP45 mag. This is empty as well. So kind of getting back to the 20 rounders that come with the gun, definitely gives it a nice look, but they absolutely suck. Comes with 3 of them. I think it's been widely discussed in the forums and various videos out there that these things are jam-o-matics. Don't know why. You would think that Grand Power would get their crap together by now. I did see a video where Aaron Cowan and Sage Dynamics did a review on the SP45A3, and he said that these require a break-in period. I did not use these enough to experience getting through that break-in period. The thing that was kind of weird is that when the first couple mags were flawless, no issues whatsoever, and then all 3 of them just became jam-matics. No matter what you did, I mean, it was weird. Sometimes you get through a few rounds, sometimes you could only get through one. The best option that you could get with these would be the HK UMP45 mags. As you see here, made in Germany. These things, they do protrude from the gun a little bit more, but definitely gives you more of that UMP45 classic look to it. It is definitely pretty cool. The downside to these magazines is that they are very expensive. So if you go on Midwest Gunworks, you can get 3 of these for $210 before tax and shipping, so definitely not cheap. One of the alternatives that you can have is that Global Ordnance came out with these 25 round magazines. As you can see, compared to the HK magazine, definitely look very similar. Lots of copying that was going on there, and fortunately they seem to work very, very well. And I took this thing out to the range for the second time. I had both the HK mags, I bought 3 of those, and I bought 3 of the Global Ordnance ones. And the Global Ordnance magazines ran just as well as the HK. No issue whatsoever. One thing that I will notice, and kind of going back to the mag release on this gun, like I mentioned, it does have ambi push button release, and then it has a paddle release. And I do feel that while most people, especially when you're using a gun like this, is just going to rely on the paddle release, the location of the push button bolt release works well enough for me. And when you push the button, the Global Ordnance magazines do not want to drop free, whereas the HK magazines just fall right out of the gun. So there's a little bit of difference between them, if it makes any difference to you whatsoever. Again, I think most people are going to resort to just using the paddle magazine and pulling them out. And when you do that with these, there is not any type of resistance that makes them difficult to release. Just when it comes to using the push button, the Global Ordnance do not want to come out, whereas the HKs just fall right out of the gun. All right, so now to talk about the bolt catch a little bit. What you see here is the HB Industries extended or enhanced bolt catch. In my opinion, this is definitely it is a must-have. I'm gonna go ahead and drop in a picture of what the factory or OEM bolt catch looks like. A lot less material to go push on, and I can tell you that with the OEM bolt catch that is in here, it is dang near impossible to be able to drop the bolt, especially on an empty magazine. Like, it's not going to happen. But even on a fully loaded magazine, it is a challenge to hit that and get the magazine to release. As a righty, if you're grabbing it and you insert the magazine like an AR and you go and hit it, it's probably a little bit easier. But me as a lefty, I am relying on just reaching up with my trigger finger and dropping that paddle. Having the HBI Industries bolt catch in here, again, in my opinion, this is definitely a must-have and something that is a huge miss for the factory bolt catch that comes in the gun. So now to talk about the charging handle. So this one here is the HB Industries folding charging handle. I did mention earlier that this is reversible. You can put it on the right side of the gun like I have now since I am a lefty, but it typically comes here on the left-hand side of the gun. So the factory charging handle is just like a little knob that sticks out. And in my opinion, at least for the setup that I have and how I grip the gun, it is in the worst possible position. It seems to just kind of stick out and like want to catch on everything, and it wants to be like how you go grab the gun. It just seems to catch my thumb. So getting the HB Industries here where it folds up is definitely, it's lower profile, and it gives you more purchase when you do go to charge the bolt. Again, just my opinion, there are also other offerings that are out there. Some of them that are just a little bit better or different from the factory knob that sticks out. But for me, the HBI Industries was definitely a must-have. All right, moving on to the safety. Like I mentioned, it is ambidextrous. You have levers that are the same size on both sides of the receiver. The throw is just a 90-degree throw. It doesn't have that nice short throw that a lot of AR triggers have, or AR safeties, I'm sorry. You're going to notice that it is very super low profile. It's nice and crisp, very smooth, easily activated. Even with as low profile it is, like, you don't feel it hit your trigger finger, knuckle at all, depending on which way you grab it. And you can definitely get it each time you go to reach for it. So I do know that HB Industries offers a kit, a safety kit for the Stribog SP45A3, along with, I believe, the SP9. It'll allow you to have a single-sided lever or also a ambi lever, but it sticks out a little bit more. Me personally, I don't feel a need to get that. Again, it is nice and crisp. It is very easily activated. It is low profile enough to be out of the way, but enough material there to go ahead and activate it 100% of the time. All right, so moving on to the barrel thread. So it is threaded from the factory, 0.578 by 28. It does come with a little thread protector on there, neural thread protector. I will say that the threads on this are a little bit longer. So what I have here, I decided to go 3-lug on this. This is the Silencer Co. 3-lug. What you see here, this portion from here to here, is the depth of the threads. When I went to go thread this on, as it was, I had a lot of threads that stuck out, which basically made this a face mount. Not sure if that's the way that it was supposed to be, but even if it wasn't, or if it was going to be okay to run it like that, I had a big gap here, which exposed a lot of threads. I was not super thrilled with the way that that looked, not to mention I wasn't really thrilled with making sure that that thing was going to be solid. So looked around on the internet, and I did happen to find this hex locking nut that was offered by Downrange Products. Pretty inexpensive thing. I think it was like 10 bucks or so. And as you see here, it takes up that gap. I do run a locking nut on my AKV as well. Typically when I mount this, what I do is I thread the locking nut all the way down to the shoulder of the barrel. Do it pretty loosely, and then I thread down the muzzle device and then tighten the locking nut against the muzzle device to ensure that it's concentric. Use a little bit of torque on that. I believe it's about 30 to 35 foot-pounds on that. Use a little bit of rock set to make sure that doesn't loosen up. But I will say that my time shooting this, along with the many rounds I've shot through my AKV, I have not had my muzzle device loosen up while using this locking nut setup. All right, so talking about the lower, you know, the OEM lower, it is made out of polymer, very similar to an MP5, where you have 2 pins that pop out here. This whole section drops out after you pull out the stock or whatever assembly that you're using on that. This is different from the MP5s. It does include the magwell on the Stribog. Lingle lowers, which is a very popular lower. They make them for many offerings out there, other SMGs and PCCs, but specific to the Stribog SP45A3, I had to replace this polymer lower with a billet lower. And some of the advantages that you have on that is that you can use a AR type lower grip on there. You can use an AR safety along with an AR trigger. Still going to use the same type of mag on here. You know, with the SP9, I think it's a big advantage that you can use different magazines, such as the Scorpion pattern on there. But in my opinion, the 45 version, it's not quite so much. I don't mind the grip on this whatsoever, or the safety and the trigger. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Because the lingle lower, it's not cheap. It's about 395 bucks, and they are very hard to get. They were out of stock as right before I made this video. I remember a few weeks ago I did sign up for out of stock alerts on their website. Got the email notification. I went on their website and checked it within 2 minutes, and they were all sold out. Don't know how many they had to offer, but they're definitely hard to get. Again, you know, what you want to get is up to you. But in my mind, in my opinion, it's not really a requirement when it comes to the SP45A3. So circling back to the trigger, so I did mention earlier that this does have an AR-15 style fire control group, meaning the trigger, the hammer, all that setup. So with the Stribog, it does have a trigger pack or a trigger housing that drops down into the lower. So being cautious of what YouTube allows you to show or not to show, I'm not going to go ahead and take this apart. But basically, once you remove the upper, in order to gain access to the trigger pack, you do have to remove the safety. With the trigger pack that sits down in here in the trigger housing, the safety is the only thing that is holding it in. Definitely plenty of videos out there that show you how to remove these to go ahead and pull the fire control group out. One of the things that I did notice that with the OEM trigger, not bad. I think it was about a 5.5 pound trigger pull. The reset, the pull, everything was not bad. I'm going to go ahead and drop in some video now of me shooting that a little bit with the factory fire control group. And you see there, at least when it comes to shooting speed, the OEM trigger, not really a slow trigger. It really wasn't too bad. I did definitely want to put a Geissele SD3G trigger in here. I do have one of those in one of my 11.5 inch ARs, and the thing is just stupid fast. The pull, everything about it is just a ridiculous trigger. So being that this is really just going to be a fun gun for me, I wanted to go with the same trigger in it. Now, I will say that with the Geisley triggers, it is not just a direct drop-in. There is some modification that is required in order for the hammer to clear the bolt. If you just go ahead and drop it in there, and you try to pull it back, you're going to see that it jams up. Not a lot of stuff out there on the internet about this, so I'm going to go ahead and drop in some pictures to show what you need to trim in order for it to clear. So I will mention that probably the easiest way to do this, when you pull the trigger pack out, and I will say that you're not going to be able to use the hammer or the trigger pins that come with the Geisley because they're too long. You know, they're made to go through and pick up on the receiver. So you want to use the OEM trigger and hammer pins that come with this. Once you get that all loaded into the trigger housing, you're going to want to go ahead and drop it back in. You can go ahead and put your safety back in, and go ahead and test how it feels. From there, you can just take your lower assembly and you can use a belt sander. In my case, I used a portable one, one handheld that you would use to just go sand flooring. Laid it on side, pull the trigger, and just profile the hammer little bit by little bit until I had positive clearance from the bolt. Now, you will be able to feel when you're still are hanging up on the bolt. But one of the things that you can do to test out on that is just go ahead and grab yourself a Sharpie, and wherever you've sanded down on the hammer, color that with a Sharpie and work the action several times. And if it's not rubbing off any of that Sharpie mark, you have cleared. Just do it little bit by little bit until you do have clearance on that. Once you do get that trimmed down enough to where you're getting clearance and get some of this Formula 4440 instant gun blue, go ahead and touch up that bare metal so you don't have to worry about corrosion, and then you're good to go. So with all of that work behind me, I will say that the SD3G trigger was not a big upgrade. And the reason why I think that is because the way that the trigger housing or the trigger pack sits in the receiver, it is only held in with the safety lever. What I found is that while the trigger pull is definitely lighter and while the brake is shorter, I cannot run this as fast as I can the OEM trigger, as strange as that sounds. Again, I think that has to do with the way that this thing is kind of loose in there. I think there's a little bit of flexing that's going on as you go and pull the trigger. I'll go ahead and drop some video of me shooting this with the SD3G. And I don't, maybe it could have been me on that day and not having the fastest trigger. I was out shooting some other guns that day, but it's not like my trigger finger was fatigued. But honestly, I was able to shoot this gun faster with the OEM trigger versus using the SD3G. So let me go ahead and drop in some footage there, side by side. Okay, so for any of you that are still with me and want to hear about some of the personal choices I made for the gun, let's go ahead and get into it. So first and foremost, I knew that right off the bat, I definitely wanted to use this as a suppressor host. So like I mentioned, the Omega 45K is the can that I have for 45. Definitely feel it is a good fit. Like I mentioned, make sure that you're going to use the jam nut with that. Depending on the muzzle device that you're going to use and the thread depth that it has, you may have to go ahead and get the hex locking nut that is on here. I think first off, getting into the sighting system. So definitely knew I was going to run a red dot on here. Thought about doing a EOTech, but I thought it was going to look a little bit big. I do have one on my AKV. It's a good fit. I just wanted to do something a little bit different. So ended up going with the Aimpoint Duty red dot sight. I am a pretty big fan of Aimpoint for itself as a brand when it comes to reliability and performance. Never owned a Duty red dot sight before. I know it's not the latest and greatest that has the multi-reticle out there, but I felt it would be a good fit for this gun. In fact, initially I did get an Aimpoint Pro for it, which I'll go ahead and drop a picture in here. And overall, I felt like it was just like too big of an optic for the gun. So ended up moving that over to my 300 Blackout and then went the Duty red dot sight. So with the mount that it comes with, I believe from the factory, it is 1.54. didn't have quite the co-witness that I wanted when it came to the irons. So speaking of the irons, as you see here, I do have the Troy fixed sights on here. The Some of the decision that I went with going with Troy's is you can get the HK front sight style that has the open hood on there. I know there's a couple different offerings out there, and I think mainly the biggest decision that people have to make is, do they want to run standard AR height at 1.41, or do they want to run something smaller like the Troy HK style sights? Now, we'll say that the fixed HK style sights, or I don't know if they run a fixed option in, but I knew what optic I was going to run along with its base. And for me, the cheek weld on this gun is great with a AR lower third co-witness style height. So even with a QD mount that I have here for my Aimpoint RDS, I didn't need to necessarily have AR height style iron sights on there, but that's what I wanted to run. I definitely wanted some of the co-witness in there. Plus, overall, I thought it was going to be a really clean look, which is why I went with these iron sights. Now, kind of going back to the QD mount here. So the mount that comes with the RDS is 1.54. It does not, while it shares a micro footprint as far as the screw pattern goes, it does sit a little bit higher. So it sits higher in comparison or aligned with like the Comp M5S. So with the battery compartment, it has to sit a little bit higher. So if I were to buy a lower third mount for the RDS or even a standard mount, it's going to sit higher than what I'm going to be able to usably use the standard AR height front iron sights, front and rear iron sights with. So tried out the factory mount first, and I did not like the co-witness I was getting. So a lot of irons cluttering the optic window or the viewing window. Did a little bit of research and found that the ADM, or American Defense Manufacturing, they do offer a mount for the CAS-V. So the CAS-V is a system that is offered that has a handguard that adds a Picatinny length for AR-15s, monolithic all the way to the back. So it does add some height. So it has a shorter mount to make up for that. So with the using a CAS-V mount, it brings the optic height up to about 1.6. I'm going to go ahead and drop in some pictures what it looked like with the OEM mount and the CAS-V mount from American Defense Manufacturing. All right, so now to talk a little bit more about the vertical grip that I have. Definitely knew I wanted to have vertical grip. Is trying a tough decision to figure out what I wanted to do. So I don't remember which video I saw. I think it was a 9-hole reviews where they were using the BCM little short, slightly slanted grip on there. I really liked how that looked, but I kind of wanted to give it a little bit more of a classical look. So looking around, I did find this grip from A3 Tactical. It is a little bit of a clone-ish when it comes to the SP5 grip. Attaches via Picatinny. You have 3 screws that mount it down or lock it down. I do like it overall, especially when into taking into account the aesthetic of it. But I will say that it is a little bit cramped when it comes to space on your grip. So there is a cutout here, whether it be a lightning cut or what, but there are some sharp edges right here on the grip that, you know, as I move around, I kind of feel like if I were doing some really fast transitional stuff, I would absolutely be slicing my knuckle up. Along with, you know, there's not a lot of room here for that. But you see it adds some dimension here that does make it a little bit more difficult to get a overhand C grip on. Pretty wide there. So basically what I end up doing is using a full grip with my thumb coming down the receiver here. Just something to keep in mind if you decide to go with this grip. So now I think that's a good segue into the light choice that I went on with this. So knew I didn't want to go like a 186 50 style body on this or size body on this. I wanted to go with the shorter. So went with the Airsoka 18350 body. along with the Malkoff EX2LV2 head. Definitely puts out pretty respectable performance. Similar and pretty much on par with the Modlite PLH V2. Ended up going with a DS00 tail cap on here because I knew that I wanted this to stay a little bit ambi. Now, originally, I did have a mod button mounted at 12 o'clock, mod button light. I ended up going away from that because of the girth that is added from the A3 tactical grip. In order to activate that, I would have to have a very wide grip on that. Wasn't super thrilled about that, and ended up going with a Surefire ST07, mounted it in an M-LOK, Magpul M-LOK mount. And when I grip the gun, like I would naturally fire this thing, it does put it right in the position of how I grip the gun. So really happy with this setup overall. Along with having the DS00, if I am shooting this right-handed, or anybody who's right-handed is going to fire, as they grip the gun, they can easily activate the push button that is on the DS00. So did require a little bit of cable management with this. I do have an Arson machining cable management guide here, kind of coming down, wrapping around the lower rail, and then having an Arson machining M-LOK mount here towards the front. So overall, I don't know how crazy I am about this cable mounting solution. Looks very busy, but at the end of the day, everything is held very securely. As far as mounting the light goes, I do want to expand on that a little bit further because it was a little bit of a journey for me. So what you are seeing here is the Arisaka SSM-M M-LOK mount, which is the mount that's just straight up and down. You see kind of the top view here. I'm going to say it was a little bit of a journey was because initially I tried using the offset mount, just your standard Arisaka offset mount. But because of the higher rail or the taller rail of the Stribog, which is kind of hard to get an example here, but you can see the M-LOK mount, it would not sit flush. So it basically, the radius on the M-LOK mount, the standard Arisaka offset M-LOK mount, would hit the rail right here. So I went ahead and tried the Arisaka Galil Ace mount. The Galil Ace has a little bit of a taller handguard on it as well. That didn't end up working out, so I reached out to Arisaka about getting, or trying out the Scout MCX mount, which is really tall, which I will go ahead and drop some pictures in here of how that fit. And as you see, it did not fit very well at all, at least with this setup that I was going to run here. So what might work for you is that if you want to mount your light to come down the bottom of the receiver or handguard, where as you grip it, you can hit it with your thumb, and using a push button, that could work, but does not work with the current type of setup that I am running here on my Stribog. So getting into the buttstock choice, like I mentioned, options available if you use the Picatinny mount. Any type of stock or brace that attaches via Picatinny will work for you. What I decided to go with on mine, a lot of it had to do with aesthetics, because, I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, looking cool is a big part of the battle. So ended up going with the B&T MP5 style stock. So this was a package that was available by HB Industries that allows for side folding. So you have the hinge adapter, which is right here, which bolts onto the stock. Again, is all permanently attached when you come, or as it comes from the HB Industries. Has the push button stock on there, folds to the right, does not lock in if that's important to you, but gives a very nice overall package with the stock folded. I will say that the B&T offering does have a shorter length of pole compared to the HK offering. Lastly, let's talk about sling setup. So few different sling setups that you could run depending on your configuration between your light, your front sight, where you put your pressure switch, and then when it comes to the rear. So with the standard MP5, you would have a little bit of a, not a hinge, but a loop that you connect an HK style hook to. Not the case with the HP Industry stock adapter, so I ended up going with the Parker Mountain Machine QD cup. So this comes that, you know, in the picture they showed it attached to the lower end of the stock here, but looking at the hole dimensions, you could either also put it here, and probably also up here, depending on what you like. So as you see here with the sling connected, it does have anti-rotational mechanisms in place. And then going to the fore end. So originally I did have a QD slot right here on the front, but the changing it over to the Magpul mount would not allow me enough room to put the QD mount in there. So she went ahead and went with the Blue Force Gears U-loop. As you see here, I have it kind of going through one of these lightning cuts here. Pretty sure it's going to be okay. You have a decent amount of metal that's there. Just connects through. And then for a sling, I am running the Edgar Sherman's design. These are one of my favorite slings that I run. All right, so that is my Stribog SP45A3 overview, shooting impressions, and my customization in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys found that useful. Again, please hit the like and subscribe button. Share this video as much as you can. It definitely helps the channel out, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks.